The Grand Meridian restaurant bustled with the usual Friday evening crowd. Executives in tailored suits, couples celebrating anniversaries, business deals happening over wine and steak. In the corner booth, a man sat alone, his posture rigid, his expression somewhere between exhaustion and loneliness. Pierre Beaumont was 58 years old, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He'd flown in from Paris that morning for a series of investment meetings. His company, Beaumont Holdings, owned hotels across Europe, and now he was expanding into America. Success followed him everywhere. Except tonight, success felt hollow. The waiter approached with a professional smile. "Good evening, sir. Can I start you with something to drink?" Pierre's English was good, but after 16 hours of meetings conducted in his second language, he was tired. "Red wine, please. Something French, if you have it." "Of course, sir." The waiter recited the wine list in rapid English. Pierre nodded at something he half understood and watched the young man walk away. Around him, conversations flowed in American English, fast and casual, full of idioms he'd learned but never quite felt natural using. He thought about his apartment in Paris, about walking along the Seine in the evening, stopping at his favorite café where Madame Laurent knew his order before he spoke. He thought about conversations in his mother tongue, the rhythm and music of French, the way words could carry weight and nuance that got lost in translation. Here, in this crowded American restaurant, surrounded by people, Pierre had never felt more alone. The wine came. He ordered without much thought something the waiter recommended. The food would be good, he knew. Everything at the Grand Meridian was good. But it wasn't home. Then he heard her voice. "Bonsoir, monsieur. J'espère que tout se passe bien ce soir." Pierre's head snapped up. A young woman stood beside. His table, maybe 26, with warm brown eyes and dark hair pulled back in the restaurant standard style. Her name tag read Claire. She held a water pitcher, refilling his glass, but the words she'd spoken were unmistakably French. "Good evening, sir. I hope everything is going well tonight." For a moment, Pierre couldn't speak. Then, in French, barely daring to hope, he said, "You speak French?" Claire smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Oui, monsieur. I grew up in Montreal. My parents moved here when I was 18, but French is still the language of my heart." Pierre felt something loosen in his chest. "I cannot tell you," he said, still in French, "how wonderful it is to hear my language. I've been speaking English for 3 days straight, and I feel like I'm slowly forgetting who I am." "I understand completely," Claire replied, her French flowing naturally, beautifully. "When I first moved here, I used to go to the library just to read French books aloud to myself. I needed to hear the words, to remember." "Please," Pierre gestured to the empty seat across from him. "If you have a moment, would you sit? Just for a minute. I promise I'm not usually this forward, but I would give anything for a real conversation right now." Claire glanced around. The restaurant was busy but not overwhelmed. Her section was covered. "Just for a minute," she agreed, sliding into the booth. For the next 20 minutes they talked. In French, rapid and easy, about Paris and Montreal, about feeling displaced in a country that spoke a different language. Pierre told her about his late wife Marie, who'd passed 2 years ago, how she used to read him poetry in bed on Sunday mornings, how he'd buried himself in work because silence in French was harder than noise in English. Claire told him about her father, who'd had a stroke last year, how the medical bills had derailed her plans to finish her literature degree, how she worked double shifts at the restaurant to help her mother, how she missed discussing Baudelaire and Rimbaud, how sometimes she felt invisible here in ways she never had back home. "You're not invisible to me," Pierre said quietly. "Tonight, you're the first person I've truly seen in months." Claire had to return to work, but throughout the evening, she checked on him, each time exchanging a few words in French. Other diners probably thought nothing of it, just a waitress being attentive. But for Pierre, each brief conversation was a lifeline. When he finally asked for the check, he left a tip that made Claire's eyes widen, $500. But more than that, he left his business card with a note written in French on the back. "Mademoiselle Claire, I own hotels across Europe, and I've been looking for someone to head my cultural programs, to ensure that every guest feels seen, heard, and welcomed in their own language. If you're interested, please call me. Your literature degree would be an asset, not a hindrance. Sometimes the best qualifications aren't on paper. Sometimes they're in understanding what it means to feel alone in a crowded room. Merci for reminding me tonight that I'm not as alone as I thought. Claire read the note twice, her hands trembling. She looked up, but Pierre was already standing, pulling on his coat. Monsieur Beaumont, she called in French, are you serious? He turned, and for the first time that evening, he smiled fully. I've built my business on recognizing talent when I see it. You have a gift, Claire, not just for language, but for seeing people. That's rarer than you know. Think about it. My offer is genuine. 3 weeks later, Claire sat in the business class section of a flight to Paris, still slightly in shock. She'd called. They'd talked. Pierre had arranged everything, visa, apartment, a salary that meant her parents' medical bills would be paid, her degree could be finished at the Sorbonne, and she'd have a career doing something she loved. Her official title was Director of Cultural Experience for Beaumont Holdings. Her actual job was to ensure that every hotel felt like home to every guest, regardless of what language they spoke. She hired multilingual staff, created programs that celebrated different cultures, transformed the hotels from places people stayed into places people belonged. But more than that, she and Pierre became friends, real friends. They met for coffee every Tuesday morning at a cafe near his office, speaking in rapid French about books and art and life. He reminded her of the father she missed being close to. She reminded him of the daughter he'd never had. 2 years later, when Claire's father came to visit Paris, Pierre insisted on hosting a dinner. Claire's mother came too, speaking halting English, overwhelmed by the elegance of Pierre's apartment overlooking the Eiffel Tower. But Pierre switched effortlessly to French, making them comfortable, asking about their lives in Montreal, sharing stories about Claire's successes. By the end of the evening, Claire's father pulled her aside. This man, he said in French, he sees you, really sees you. That's a rare gift, ma chérie, to be seen and valued for who you are. Claire watched Pierre chatting with her mother, making her laugh, and felt tears prick her eyes. He told me once that I reminded him he wasn't alone. But Papa, he did the same for me. I was so lost, working those double shifts, feeling invisible. He saw me when I couldn't see myself. That night, after her parents left, Claire stayed to help Pierre clean up. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who truly understand each other. Thank you, Claire said finally in French, for everything, for that night in the restaurant, for believing in me, for giving me my life back. Pierre set down the dish he was washing and looked at her seriously. Claire, you gave me something far more valuable. That night I was drowning in loneliness, in a language that wasn't mine, in a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. You threw me a rope. You reminded me that connection isn't about where we are, but about being understood. He smiled. Besides, you've made my hotels better than I ever could have alone. You've taught my staff that hospitality isn't about 5-star service. It's about making someone feel at home, even when they're thousands of miles away from everything familiar. Claire hugged him. This man who'd become her mentor, her friend, her family. I was just a waitress who spoke French. No, Pierre corrected gently. You were someone who saw another human being struggling and chose to reach out in the language he needed most. That's not luck, Claire. That's character. That's the kind of person who changes lives without even realizing it. Sometimes the most important conversations happen in languages most people around us don't understand. Sometimes the deepest connections form between strangers who share something more fundamental than nationality or background. They share the experience of being lost and found, of feeling invisible and suddenly seen. And sometimes, all it takes is someone brave enough to say hello in the language of someone's heart. That simple act of recognition, of choosing to bridge the gap between loneliness and connection, can change 2 lives forever. Because in the end, we're all just looking for someone who speaks our language. Not just the words we know, but the longing underneath them. The need to be understood. The hope that somewhere someone sees us as we truly are. If this story touched you, Please like and share it with someone who understands what it means to feel like a stranger in a familiar place. Subscribe for more stories about unexpected connections and the power of truly seeing each other, and leave a comment about a time when someone reached out to you in exactly the way you needed. Your story might inspire someone else to reach across the gap and make a stranger feel less alone.